Hey everyone, welcome back to another deep dive, and this time we're diving into those weekend box office numbers.
Yeah, we're going to be looking beyond those dollar amounts, those raw numbers, and really trying to figure out, what these figures actually tell us about what's going on in cinema today.
So should we jump right into it?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's start with Smile 2. It opened this weekend to what a lot of people are considering a pretty respectable $22 million.
Which for a horror film is really good.
Yeah, pretty good, right?
Yeah, especially a sequel.
Especially a sequel.
The first Smile debuted at 22.6, so this is basically neck and neck with the original.
I was going to say, do we know how that compares to the original film? Because I feel like in the horror genre, sequels don't always do so well.
Yeah, you're right. They kind of fall off usually, but this is bucking the trend for sure.
Interesting. So what is it about this one?
Well, those Thursday preview numbers were interesting. 2.5 million for Smile 2. So it seems like people were ready for round two.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like a lot of it was the marketing. I kept seeing those creepy smiles everywhere online.
Well, the marketing was very effective. They know how to creep people out.
Yeah, makes you think twice about smiling.
Right, exactly. But it seems like it's more than just hype. The audience scores are actually pretty good. 3.5 stars on PostRec and 71% positive. It's pretty decent.
Yeah, so people are actually enjoying the scares and not just going because they saw it on TikTok.
Exactly. And even the critics are giving it a thumbs up. 85% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is certified fresh. That's not easy for a horror movie.
Not easy at all.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got smiles all around for Smile 2. But let's shift gears to something a little less terrifying. We Live in Time. A24, bringing us those heartstring-tugging stories as always. It brought in about 4.3 million.
Yeah, not a huge number at first glance, but this was a limited release, right?
Right, and a smaller film.
Exactly. So we have to look at it in context. And when we do, we see a per theater average of $4,300 across 955 locations. That's huge.
So people were seeking this one out.
They definitely were. This wasn't just your average Friday night at the movies. This was people hearing the buzz and wanting to experience it for themselves.
And the buzz is definitely real. I mean, 98% on Rotten Tomatoes for a romance.
Almost unheard of.
Practically unheard of. What do you think is resonating with people about this film?
Well, you've got Florence Pugh and Andrew Garfield, so obviously star power is a factor. But beyond that, I think this film taps into that desire for genuine human connection.
Does we all need a little bit of?
Especially these days with everything going on in the world. And A24, they have a knack for telling those raw, authentic stories that really stay with you.
Yeah, and this seems to be another hit for them. And it makes you wonder, with those other adult dramas that have come out recently, The Apprentice, Piece by Piece, Saturday Night, they haven't performed quite as well. Why do you think that is?
Well, those are all good films in their own right, but maybe they didn't quite capture that same level of emotional depth or relatability that We Live in Time has.
Yeah, maybe this signals a shift in what audiences are looking for. Maybe they're craving something a little more, thought-provoking, a little less about explosions and car chases.
Possibly. It could be that We Live in Time is a sign that audiences are still hungry for those smaller, more character-driven stories.
And speaking of character-driven stories, did you see the numbers for Anora?
Oh, yeah, Anora. That's another one that's defying expectations.
Big time, $105,000 per theater average.
It just goes to show you the power of word of mouth.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And the critics are loving it, too. I mean, 98% on Rotten Tomatoes. That's not just hype. That's a quality film.
Absolutely. It seems like they really struck a chord with this one.
So I've got heartfelt romance. We've got indie darlings making waves. But before we move on to some of the other big releases, I'm curious about Goodrich. I mean, Michael Keaton, Mila Kunis, big stars. Seemed like it had a lot of potential, but it didn't quite take off.
Yeah, you'd think with those names attached it would have been a slam dunk, but it seems like it just got lost in the shuffle a bit.
Yeah, sometimes it's just bad timing, or maybe the marketing wasn't quite right.
Could be a combination of factors. Even with a great cast and a good story, it's tough to break through in such a crowded marketplace. Sometimes it's just not the right moment.
But speaking of films that are finding their audience, let's talk about The Wild Robot. This family film is doing incredibly well, projected to hit over 100 million domestically by Sunday.
Yeah, 102.3 to be exact. That's impressive for any film, let alone one that's, not a sequel or a superhero movie.
Exactly. It proves that original stories can still find an audience. And this one seems to have that cross-generational appeal.
It's true. I mean, who doesn't love a good robot story? But I also think the animation style is a big draw for families.
Oh, absolutely. The visuals are stunning. Really top-notch animation. And, While The Wild Robot is charming families over here, Terrifier 3 is still satisfying those horror fans out there. It's projected to make another 7.5 to 8 million this weekend.
Which is not bad at all for a slasher sequel. It seems like those gorehounds are pretty loyal. They know what they like, and they're not afraid to see it again and again. But it also shows that there's a real market for these niche genre films.
Absolutely. Sometimes you just want to see some good practical effects,
Yeah.
you know. But on a completely different note, let's talk about a classic that's back on the big screen, Beetlejuice.
Ah, a true Tim Burton masterpiece. And it's still drawing in the crowds, projected to add another 5.1 million to its lifetime gross this weekend alone.
It's amazing how well that film holds up.
Yeah.
I mean, people still quote it endlessly.
Right. It's one of those movies that just gets funnier every time you watch it.
Absolutely. And speaking of films that never get old, Hocus Pocus is back in theaters just in time for Halloween.
Talk about a nostalgia trip. I bet
Uh,
those Sanderson sisters are raking in the big bucks this weekend.
It's projected to make almost $1 million. 940,000 to be exact. Not bad for a film that came out over 30 years ago.
Proof that you can't keep a good witch down. But, it's interesting to think about what makes these films, Beetlejuice, Hocus Pocus, so enduring. Why do we keep coming back to them year after year?
It's a good question. I think part of it is that they have this great mix of humor and heart that appeals to both kids and adults.
And they're just plain fun to watch. They don't take themselves too seriously, and they're full of iconic moments and quotable lines.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You can't go wrong with a little bit of spooky fun, especially
Yes.
around Halloween.
Exactly. Speaking of fun, did you see how much buzz Smile 2 generated online before it even hit theaters?
Oh yeah, it was everywhere. I mean, those creepy smiles were inescapable.
The marketing team really knew how to get people talking. It's like they tapped into our collective fear of creepy grins.
And those early reactions were incredible. People were saying it was even scarier than the first one, that the jump scares were next level.
So the hype was real. They actually delivered on those promises.
They did, and it just goes to show you the power of social media when it comes to building anticipation for a film. But at the end of the day, you need a good movie to back it up.
Exactly. You can't just rely on marketing gimmicks. The film itself has to deliver. It's true, you need substance to back up the hype. But it's interesting, right? Because you've got a film like Smile 2 that's really relying on that online presence, all that social media buzz. And then you've got something like Anora, which is finding success through that more traditional word of mouth. It makes you wonder if those lines are starting to blur.
It does make you wonder if those lines are blurring. Like, maybe
Yeah.
the way we discover films is changing, but the things that resonate with us, like you said, a good scare, a genuine emotional connection, those are timeless.
They really are timeless. And speaking of timeless, let's go back to those adult dramas for a sec. We Live in Time, doing so well, really exceeding expectations. It's a win for those kinds of films, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it gives you hope, right? Because with The Apprentice and Piece by Piece and Saturday Night all kind of struggling to find their footing, it seemed like maybe there wasn't space for those quieter, more character-driven stories anymore.
Right, like they were getting drowned out by all the noise.
Exactly. And it's easy to think that those films are a thing of the past now. But We Live in Time. It kind of reminds us that those stories, those human stories are still relevant. They still have the power to move us.
And maybe even more so now, in a world that's so fast-paced and chaotic. Sometimes we just need to slow down and feel something real.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We need those reminders that we're not alone, that other people are going through the same things, that we're all just trying to figure it out. And Anora, too, that's another film that speaks to that human experience in such a powerful way.
It does, and it's great to see audiences responding to that.
So as we wrap up this week's box office deep dive, what's the biggest takeaway for you? What have we learned?
Well, I think this weekend proves that audiences are craving diversity. They want a little bit of everything. They want to be scared, they want to be moved, they want to laugh, and they want to feel those things in a theater surrounded by other people.
That shared experience is so important. And even though streaming is amazing and gives us so much choice, there's still nothing quite like seeing a film on the big screen.
Couldn't agree more. It's a completely different experience. So here's to another exciting weekend at the box office. And who knows what surprises await us next week.
I can't wait to find out. And until next time, happy viewing, everyone. Remember those numbers, they tell a story, so pay attention.